Hi everyone, it's great to be with you. Welcome along to EHR715, Session 2, 2016. I'll start off with these PowerPoints, just having a brief introduction, welcoming you along and hoping that this unit is enjoyable and challenging for many reasons. It does allow you to think about your own personal experiences with links to your personal, professional, academic experiences, and so that gives you the opportunity to build your professional skills in association with the readings and literature that you go into. Also, it's interesting that HRD can be related to individuals, including yourself, groups, organisations, and indeed whole societies. So it is interesting to think about these concepts at these different levels. I know from looking at your applications to get into the graduate certificate, you've got a wonderful, varied and interesting backgrounds. And so hopefully there'll be many opportunities to extend your knowledge and skills, both theoretically and practically, and build on your existing professional skills. So I'm your convener for the semester. My name's Cheryl Ramsey. I do have a background in clinical and organisational psychology as well as education. I've taught here at Griffith for a number of years, and when I did work, I worked largely in the health departments in Queensland, New South Wales, looking at staff training and strategic staff training across the areas of various health-related departments. So I'm looking forward to working with you this semester. So the most important document for us at the moment is the Unit Outline and Assessment Guide. And that is on the website. It includes essential information about the unit and about the 3 assessment items. So the best thing to do would be to read that guide very carefully and in its entirety as soon as you can. And also just have a play around with the website, see how it's set up, and make sure that you are aware of the layout and where the resources are. The unit content and the assessment items are designed to facilitate learning across the whole semester. We have 3 major assessment items. The assessments relate to the 3 modules primarily, but there's crossover, a lot of crossover in the case of the 3rd assessment item, but I do have a separate information on that. But there are resources on the website for each assessment item. Okay, so the textbook, Gold et al., it's the 2nd edition, 2013, and it offers really an efficient and effective way to present and discuss the essential aspects of the topic. So I do refer to the text in lectures and in assessment items. And of course the text is supplemented with readings and activities and case studies from elsewhere, and you can find these on the website. Unfortunately, the text is not available online at this time. I've looked into that and we can't get it through the library, but it is important for your studies, so I hope you will be able to buy that through the OUA bookshop. Some of the other chapters that I've copied, they can only be that. You'd know about the copyright laws. There's only a certain amount of a book. So Noe and Winkler's quite an important textbook, and I've copied as much of that as I can and put that on the website. That's as supplementary material. So, wishing you all the best for the semester. We do use the discussion board for questions, and it's a good way of communicating, because then when I respond or others respond, the information's there for everybody to have a look at. And I also do appreciate that you are studying, firstly, and you're studying online, so that can often suggest that you're balancing a number of complicated roles. I understand that, so do please have a look at all of the material, the assessment items and the due dates, and make sure it is manageable for you. Sometimes students decide to postpone one or more units so they can actually enjoy the study and don't become too stressed. But hopefully it's a manageable subject the way it's set up, that you have all of the information about the assessment items and the topics right now. So hopefully it'll be a very rewarding unit of work for you, and all the best for the semester. Just moving over now to the overview of the unit, and I'd really encourage you to read this in the guide, but you'll see that there's a description of the unit on page 3 with the overall aim about developing professional HRD skills and the individual, group and organisation levels that I talked about previously. You can also see the learning outcomes on page 3, or the learning objectives that we'd like to achieve around theoretical frameworks, research findings from the literature, and reflective insights into HRD. Also interested in development of personal, group and self-management skills that you need as a professional. And analysis, of course, prioritising and discussing HRD issues and strategies is really central to the course, to the unit, as well. So to do that, we have 3 modules of work, and you'll see those on page 5 of the guide. So we're looking at the nature of HRD, looking at how we design for learning so that it's we don't conceptualise it obviously as a random process, but that we have control over how learning is designed. And then we're looking at applications at work, those 3 modules are really topped by the introduction and finished off by unit review. And we also look at case analysis, because you'll see that the 3rd assessment item is about case analysis. So module 1 really covers the first few weeks, and where we look at the nature and scope of HRD. Then we go on to strategy. Now strategy is especially looked at in assessment item 3, but strategy forms an overview for all of our studies here. And then later on we look at, in week 3, personal and professional applications that are relevant to your own circumstances, for example your own learning and your own career. So the assessment items also cover individual approaches, organisational perspectives and overall case analysis. Please start the assessment early to assist learning and engagement. The reason for that first assessment item having different components is really to help you to become engaged and to cover the really key aspects of this unit. In what's actually week 4, I thought would be the best time. I changed my mind about that. So week 4 we have an online classroom and we can talk in real time. By that time I'm hoping that you'll be quite well advanced with item 1 in terms of this discussion. So I'll record that session as well if you can't get to that. But yeah, let's hope so. Now I've used the word collaborate session here as well. Sometimes I will refer to it as that, but it is our version of the online classroom. So referencing style is most important. Please refresh your knowledge of the APA style. Some of you might be very familiar with that, but if you need to, I'll put some resources on under the assessment tab. So to get on to the key topic for week 1, the nature and scope of HRD, just looking at some key definitions and processes, develop knowledge and understanding of HRD, including the HRD role, and thinking about what we mean by context within HRD. So there really are many debates, approaches and definitions, and a good thing about your textbook, the Gold et al., is that they really look at that bigger picture. They don't just present HRD as a recipe or anything like that. It's really saying this is it's a complex area and it's open to debate. That there's really not settled and accepted meanings. And so two definitions that they give illustrate this. The first is organised learning experiences provided by employers within a specified period of time to bring about the possibility of performance improvement and or personal growth. And I've taken that from Nadler and Nadler in 1989. So you can just see there that that's about employers, its specified time period, its performance improvement at work and or personal growth, which is thought to impact on performance at work. So it's an interesting definition. HRD, according to Stewart, and this is another definition, is constituted of planned interventions in organisational and individual learning processes. So there are a couple of definitions that the textbook actually goes into. So I guess importantly, it's a planned rather than a random approach. There's some debate as to whether the emphasis should be on personal growth or performance, and the emphasis on the employer actually varies. So in that second definition, you can see that there's less emphasis on the employer. So, for example, you might organise some sort of training session for yourself, which is very relevant to you. So it's much more of an emphasis on a partnership between you and the organisation. That is one of the questions in the assessment item 1. It's asking you to look at those definitions. So we have a focus on the self at the beginning of this unit because HRM professionals and HRD professionals really do rely on their own skills and resources, and so it's important to understand processes from an individual perspective as well. How would I feel in this situation? What are my experiences? How can I work to facilitate change and learning and development? So we're interested in how people learn and how you learn, and how do people develop their skills and potential, and how do you do that? How can I conceptualise and implement HRD, and what's actually been your experience? So the exercise in week 1 is about reflecting on your own experiences of good and bad learning experiences, which is a bit of a basic way of saying, what have you really enjoyed about learning and what hasn't worked so well for you. So some of the examples are around things like a good learning experience is where you really do feel like you gain valued skills, you were included in the group, you learnt from your peers or whatever. And bad, of course, you'll all have your own individual experiences of that, but often it's because the material was badly coordinated or all sorts of reasons for that. So just to emphasise again, we're talking about applications to yourself, to groups, organisations, national and international issues. So there really is a growing move towards considering HRD in broader contexts, and I guess a good example is the various disasters that we have here in Australia, flooding, bushfires, all those sorts of terrible things that impact on people. But you will see that there's an emergence of nationally recognised and accepted HRD programs of education to help us to respond better to disasters, and also to improve safety legislation and learning about that. Also, as our global interconnectedness grows, I certainly think that these more generalised pictures of HRD will grow as well. HRD is relevant to many contexts, as I'm suggesting, but also it's not just areas of paid employment, it's also to voluntary groups. For example, where HRD is absolutely crucial for volunteer workers. So there is a continued practice. HRD is an identifiable area of research and practice, and you will see that in the readings that you come across and explore in this unit. There is an example of, I actually don't know how to say that, ALAGARAJ, on your reading list, which reviews HRD perspectives and what that's got to do with organisational performance. So in other words, it's seen as a really important part of improving organisational performance, and we would argue skills for individuals as well. Notably, HRD programs and interventions are research projects in themselves. So whenever we think about HRD processes, we really do have to think about evaluation, both in the short and long term. Now, you'll see that come through in the unit. So there's a model, the Kirkpatrick model, that we'll talk about, where, for example, at the end of a training session, you can evaluate the short-term learning, but then the idea is that you go back in a few months or a few weeks or whatever you determine to see whether that learning has transferred to the work environment. Has it lasted, or did people just, feel good and go? So evaluation's very, very important, and that needs to be worked out in relation to your initial needs and objectives. So this point comes across very strongly in assessment item 2 for you to think about. So chapter 3 of the text outlines a range of contexts, including public sector, voluntary sector, small business, and you'll be interested in those, and maybe some more than others, but it's important to be aware of the context that you're thinking about. So this is what comes through in your case studies. HRD professionals need to be contextually aware of the sector, of the history of the organisation, the cultural diversity, people's, where they're coming from, the pressures, the costs, the benefits, the scope. So in other words, being contextually aware really is about being aware of what's happening inside the organisation as well as outside. And we do try and look at that next week in strategy, and it also comes up in your final assessment, using various frameworks to think about what's happening inside the organisation and what's happening outside. Another important aspect is structure. When you're analysing an organisation, it is important to be aware of the size, the hierarchical levels, how things are positioned in the building, and relationships between HRD departments and others. And leadership is also very important. And these issues do come up in assessment item 3, and they're talked about all through the unit. But if you're looking at a case study, and you're thinking about, okay, the HRD department, if it's actually physically separated from other sections and there's quite an impermeable type of barrier, that could well be a problem in terms of building relationships and working with other departmental areas. So do think about structure, how the organisation's put together. So there's many examples of HRD programs and activities. So they can be cultural change programs. So that can be organisational cultural change programs. Making changing the culture to be more responsive to customers, for example. There can be leadership and management development programs, and we do spend a week on that. Talent management programs, so developing people who have particular talents. There can be cross-functional placement programs, so helping people to diversify their skills in perhaps another department. Developing programs to develop knowledge and skills associated with new technology. I think we're all aware of that. Occupational health and safety programs, orientation programs. So there's many examples of HRD programs that you have probably come across, and that you will certainly be able to think about more as we go through the semester. So, in conclusion, HRD is a complex area. It is subject to different debates and conceptualisations. The definitional aspects remain open to debate, and HRD professionals do need to be self-aware and contextually aware. What organisation, are we in? What are we talking about? And to understand the theoretical and practical aspects of HRD so that they can be applied to the particular organisation. So, looking ahead, please read the unit outline and assessment guide and consider the questions, any questions you have. Do the activity on good and bad learning, training, development experiences so that you can have a really good insight into that, and that'll help you with both assessments 1 and 2 and probably 3 as well. So I'd encourage you to start on assessment item 1. It does reflect essential conceptual aspects in the unit. Assessment item 1 is broken into a number of questions to assist you with developing the conceptual base and easing you into the unit. A number of models and ideas and theories are included there, and all of the resources that I've mentioned are available in the assessment section, apart from the textbook resources. So next week we look at HRD role and its strategy. So please have a good week, and I'll be back in touch.